You're using electricity to make ice because you're using electricity, you're pumping more CO2, you're causing climate change by using a bag of ice. I kid you not, this is where they're bringing it to. But don't look at all the extremes that just destroyed 1 million acres of crops in America. Bent jet streams and cloud cells, compressing winds on frontal boundaries that are driven by the sun. Don't look at that. Stop using ice for your 4th of July celebrations. Welcome back for the second half here. Many Ice Age Conversations, brought to you on TV Uncensored. I'm your host, David Dubine. Every other Friday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before the break, talking about, are these temperatures really the all-time record temperatures that we're seeing, or is it a hodgepodge of misleading headlines that tell half-truths for the skimming audience and misplaced temperature stations? Well, we'll find out about the temperature stations as we move through the rest of the hour. But my whole area of study has been how the sun affects the jet streams, the cloud cells, the magnetism of our planet, and how, in turn, that will affect food production. And if you go back through certain chapters of history, about every 400 years, you'll start to find that there's been a disruption in our world. What was causing the disruption long before any type of burning of fossil fuels, automobiles, or any types of industry or industrial manufacturing, shipping, logistics, etc.? Well, that was what I started to delve into going back, say, 400 years prior to the birth of Christ. So a good 2,500 years of data. But you can start to see these blips that stick out like a sore thumb of disruption. So forecasting it, we're into another one. My contention, along with John Casey, Valentina Zarkova, Piers Corbin, and a host of others, was that this solar cycle was going to end early, and it was going to be a very short and not very strong solar cycle, that the average amount of sunspots would be below 100 on the average for the solar cycle. We were laughed at, ridiculed, and told, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not a solar physicist. You didn't go to the university and study solar physics. You did it on your own with all these other solar physicists who taught you. Okay. The solar cycle was predicted to end early by those who actually study these cycles. It was not predicted to go early or short by those who were saying, no, it's going to be the strongest ever, the longest ever. And because of that, it's going to drive heating on the planet. And we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You just said that out of the side of your mouth. Yet in this side of the mouth, you're saying there's global warming caused by CO2. Like, what is it? It's the sun or it's CO2. You can't have both. But there's the same people being funded by United Nations and all different think tanks and those groups inside governmental bodies here at NOAA and NASA. Speak ill and go a different direction for an explanation of why temperatures change on the planet, you lose your job. Your funding's cut. I've had many a conversation with those who have experienced that. But again, how much can you lie to yourself? Like, once you get these facts and you understand how the mechanisms of solar activity affect food production on the planet, and that would be the main driver of our civilization. The food affects the economy. The food affects population migration. The food affects movement of armies to go get more resources. If that is diminished or curtailed in any way, then you can see that fingerprint all through history. And those who are saying, hey, we're back at it again, so governments might want to prepare, that's not what they want to hear. They want to keep the populace distracted as long as they can. A surging national debt is bullish for gold. The debt ceiling drama ended with nominal budget cuts and a shiny new credit card with no limit for the federal government. The first business day after the U.S. Treasury increased our national debt by $350 billion. In 2010, the debt was $13 trillion and gold was $1,000 an ounce. 2020, $23 trillion is the debt and $1,500 an ounce. Today, $32 trillion and $2,000 an ounce. So now we have $1 trillion in interest payments annually and another $1 trillion on defense. Do you think spending's going to slow down? Bloomberg stated gold appears as a caged bull awaiting a catalyst, and the commercial real estate crisis appears to be that catalyst. It's no wonder Google searches for how to buy gold hit record levels in 2023. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention the Adapt 2030 channel. They're going to give you some great service. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. Also, Patriot Gold Group, Consumer Affairs top-rated IRA gold dealer 6 years in a row. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video. The reason I'm talking about this is let's start with the sun. And oops, all the experts got it wrong. The solar cycle is going to end sooner than they thought, meaning shorter solar cycle than was predicted. Now, whoever would have guessed that? Oh, those that predicting going into a grand solar minimum and low solar activity on a 400-year cycle, that's who. But, you know, there's contradictory information that might make people question the idea of paying global taxes into the system and reducing your lifestyle and bringing you back to serfdom. And that's what they're really afraid of, is that awareness and that whole conversation. It's very difficult to have climate scientists get on an actual debate with you, where you can rip up a bunch of stuff from the internet and say, wait, this chart here and that chart there, that's completely opposite of what you're talking about. Now you prove your point to me, because right here's what it says. And it's difficult for them to come back with rebuttals, so they just choose not to debate. Classic examples through the last several years, especially Michael Mann, and who's that, Schmidt. And I can't believe these guys are still getting airtime. Mr. Hockey Stick of there's going to be no more sea ice left after 2009, 2013, 2015, 2018, 2020, 2021, and we're still here and we still have sea ice, and yet these people still get platforms. Well, the Earth is going to die. We only have 96 months left, and we only have 500 days left. We only have this many days left, and we're still here. And they're still yapping on, oh, no, sorry, it's another 5 years. My bad. We just got the next, but give me the stage again. I'll be the actor or actress again. I'll say what you want to say. Give me the money. That's exactly the way it works. Those who don't get paid. So the sun's chaotic peak. What are they talking about, a chaotic peak, do you think? Oh, they're going to end it before predicted projections suggested. That was a known for those who follow the cycles. So what does that really mean for us? Well, it's going to peak early and then it's going to slide down. And these temperatures and effects on our planet's atmosphere are going to be pronounced, especially when the magnetic field changes so quickly and rapidly. So on the left, this is a great representation here. On the left is where we sort of sit right now at solar maximum. There's a lot of, magnetic activity, interlooping. There's a huge amount of sunspots and, solar flares coming off, and Hyder flares, where that's a rope that bounces off and shoots off the plasma sheet there. And then we have on the right, the cool, the calm in a solar minimum. Now what we sit and where we're going to on the right, this is a regular 11-year solar cycle image here of activity and quiet. But we're going to be going into a 400-year period of quiet, where that on the right there is going to get much dimmer. And the magnetic field will, in turn, be reflected on our planet, where the magnetic field won't be so strong, so it's not going to lock in jet streams and cloud cells. Hence the food production, the plant and the harvest date, it's going to be out of whack. This is the whole thing that scares the powers that be, that really don't want to terrify people, that are they're going to be, the rule of law would break down long before any of this occurs. You still have another year and a half before the biggest events of this will really be known. At that point, I'm not sure what's going to happen. The players and the actors will have just disappeared out into the woodwork, and we'll be left out here going, oh, where's everybody at? So the forecast combined here, how it's already flattening off. They actually need to push this down on 2024. That some of the newer models actually show it trending down. 2024 is actually dropping off already. And this would be one of the shortest solar cycles ever recorded in the last 200 years. So I like to go further back in time than 40 years on the satellite record to prove a point about global temperatures, or even 150 years. So we take us back to the 1700s. In true Maunder minimum, they have some what they call -1, -2 solar cycles, which takes us back in like 1640s, 1630s. They have about 8 cycles going back another 100 years prior. So you get around the 1620s or 30s, basically with reconstructed They were using telescopes and just drawing it on pieces of paper, and that was kind of in its infancy right then to understand sunspots and solar activity. But there are some records of those who, did that kind of science over the last 100 years prior to the established science itself. So these are the solar cycles in intensity going back. Now, if this truly is just going to drop straight off or, mumble along here and then drop off, then we're looking at something like 1820. Which is a 200-year cycle. Okay. Or something like the year 1700 to 1710. I just went up and it went back down. And there's a couple instances of this. If it truly is going to drop off so quickly, the closest one we would get is somewhere probably around 1630 or around 1710, which leads credibility and validity to we are going into a multi-century cycle here. Now, those who knew this in advance would try to give you excuses when you saw the changes, and I call that excuse global warming. And the idiocy of seeing things like this at the 4th of July coming out, everybody's going to barbecues, everybody's getting bags of ice for the coolers, and here they come out with climate-friendly cocktail recipes, go light on the ice. And I said, what? This is from Scientific American, not some random supermarket checkout thing that you pick off. I forget what they call those kind of rags when it's just all about entertainment and thing, and it's just UFOs here and Bigfoot over there, those kind of papers. Scientific American has some credentials behind it. Ice machines run continually until they're full, potentially for several hours at a time. You're using electricity to make ice because you're using electricity, you're pumping more CO2, you're causing climate change by using a bag of ice. I kid you not, this is where they're bringing it to. But don't look at all the extremes that just destroyed 1 million acres of crops in America. Bent jet streams and cloud cells, compressing winds on frontal boundaries that are driven by the sun. Don't look at that. Stop using ice for your 4th of July celebrations. Are you kidding me? Right there. I'll even leave I hope you screen grabbed it. And then, Mamma Mia, up in New York, we went to a coal-fired place. I forget, it was in an old church. And it was up near Times Square, and pretty cool place. It was an old church, but they had like 4 different pizza ovens fired by coal, and they had all this stained glass. It was a really cool setting for a pizza joint. And they cooked, again, with coal. They've been there for 100 years. And now New York says, you know what, anybody that's using wood or coal for firing your pizza, you got to stop it. This made all kind of headlines, massive amounts of headlines, global headlines. And then you read into it, it's only going to affect 100 restaurants. Cleverly disguised again. Like, they make it like every single pizza place is using wood, and anywhere you see pizza, it's causing global warming. But finally, reading way down into the article, it said that city official in New York said that under 100 restaurants in total would be impacted. But then how did this become a global news headline is the question. It just goes on and on, the push. And this whole global warming thing too, well, did they tell you that's been trending upward after the little ice age ended 350 years ago? So that trend of upward temperatures has been literally since the 1550s. It dropped off in the 1600s again, bringing us through the Maunder minimum, lack of solar activity, 400-year low in solar activity, which we're about to repeat right now. And as you see, the temperatures rose and have been rising since we came out of a mini ice age itself. Like, where did we get involved with this natural? Oh, you're blamed on the natural thing now. Okay, I get it. This is a great chart here, and it shows the medieval warming period, which many should do some study into. If you think these are the warmest temperatures ever, how do you think the Vikings were on Greenland and had vast colonies where their sheep were able to graze in open fields as far as the eye could see, and now it's ice fields? Just about 1,000 years ago. You tell me. The stories are there for all to see through history. Yet they're trying to tell you that somehow they were able to colonize Greenland with vast fields of grass that don't exist now because it's too cold right now for the grass to grow. Yet 1,000 years ago, grass grew there because it was. Explain that one to me. A child could understand that makes no sense. And if you look at Dr. Roy Spencer here, again, we're going to go satellite record, because if you want to go satellite record and all these things, okay, I'll play. So if we look at the June temperatures, it was 0.38 or almost 0.4 of a degree Celsius above the 30-year baseline. But you notice those temperatures have been running and running along that line. And why did nobody talk about that dipping below the 30-year temperature average for the year 2020, 21, 22? Like, see, it dipped below that 30-year average line. That's why you didn't hear much about runaway temperatures. Oh, wait, El Nino's back this year. That is a natural cycle that heats specific water temperatures that in turn has an effect on the planet. They can talk to their blue in the face about global warming, whatever, but to say that El Nino is responsible for part of that, again, well, it's a natural cycle, but it's all, CO2, you got to pay global taxes. You can't have both. This is a very inconvenient chart, especially the last 3 years of La Nina that brought those global temperatures below the 30-year average. You didn't hear much about that. Now, this is a great one. Share with your friends and family. And the whole crux of this heating thing is temperature stations, which I love. Joe Nova, go check out her site. Amazing researcher down in Australia. Jennifer Morrissey is another one down there that you might want to check out. So they went around and they did a bunch of different, analysis of where the temperature stations were located. Now, this is a good one. This is what temperature station is supposed to be like. In a grassy area, unobstructed by trees, so it can get the sunlight and you can get a temperature. I said, okay, that's a good one. And they're trying to show you where it should be. A static temperature station, and this is considered a good version of. Well, what they're starting to do now is put temperature stations where there are heat islands. Now, when you look at this, it's innocuous, and you say, oh, there's just some rocks there. It can't really affect the temperature too much until you lose FLIR, and then you start to see the radiating heat coming off. Now, what do you think it's going to do to that thermometer that's right there at the edge of the rocks and the boulders? Do you think the temperatures might be increased a little bit? Just asking for a friend. Here we go. And FLIR also. When you're looking at the temperatures in the middle of the pavement, extremely hot, but look over onto the grass. It's showing around 18 degrees Celsius, but in the center there, you're overboiling at 133. See, the difference is so vast, but it's so quick at the line where the heat dissipates or it onsets. This is another good example of where a temperature station should be, what it should look like out in a field. Perfect. This is what they all should be. This is what they all were when the temperature monitoring network began back in the 1930s. Oh, by the way, the Dust Bowl and warmer temperatures as well back then. But here's where the thermometers sit today, in the middle of parking lots, just like this. Now, do you think this temperature station right there in the middle of a parking lot in the middle of July with cars going by on a holiday weekend, chock full of travelers and traffic jam, might have a little something to do with an upward reach on a temperature? And you say, well, that's only one of them. Maybe not. It seems like the entire network has been redistributed to be pushed next to objects that, in my opinion, would increase the heat. Why would they do that? Well, if you're going to increase the heat, you could say there's global temperature rises to all-time highs. We need more tax money. We need to control you. You can have 3 pieces of clothing. You can only travel once a year on a jet airliner. And you need to sit back and consume less because you're heating the planet, while the elite run around in their private jets and yachts. Brick wall, concrete, overflowing, and also refrigeration unit. You ever stand in front of like an air conditioner? Not inside the building, outside, where the hot air is being blown out as it cools the interior of the building? That. So do you think that temperature station where all the red arrows are pointing to, do you think it'd be warmer than normal if you stuck it in, say, the middle of a field or in the middle of the yard next to that building? Why do they choose to put it there? Question. Rhetorical, perhaps. But here's another one. This is in Florida. Now, the thermometer is next to exhaust again, next to concrete and wastewater treatment tanks, which generally have an ambient temperature above or around, especially in wintertime, that water would retain heat more. You think that would maybe change temperatures, 1/10 of a degree, 2/10 of a degree, 1/2 a degree warmer? Now do this over thousands of stations and you start to get the picture. And if you're unhappy that it's, in a parking lot or next to a building, why don't we put you next to the airport? I know a lot of you like to travel. You know, when your jet takes off, well, here's a temperature station right next to where the jets are taking off. Do you think that would happen? Well, they're going to taxi first. Sorry. They're going to taxi and come around there. And you think how slow jets are moving with all the exhaust blowing out of the back of those jet engines, just 100 feet away from the tarmac, which, by the way, is completely asphalt itself. Surrounded by parking garages and buses and trucks and other asphalt islands. Do you think that would affect the temperatures there? Thermometers on top of the buildings. What do you think? That's a heat island. That's asphalt, street, air conditioning unit, and then your thermometers on top of a building in the middle of a heat island. This is truly the state of our temperature stations today. You think putting it next to a cell phone tower that's running with all that radiation going up and out of there, and then reflective off steel bases and reflective around concrete, you think that would have anything to do with temperatures going up? This is one I took myself. I lived in Taipei, and I was walking along one day. I go, no way, there's a temperature station. I did a video on this. Year 2017. I actually had to look into the video to get this image out of it again. There's a temperature station in the middle of Taipei. Huge, busy, massive street, 4 lanes going in each direction. What about the traffic jams when they're all stopped up and people are, idling and, fumes are coming out and everybody's just sitting there? You think that would change the temperatures? This is a global phenomenon. This is not just US based. And now you can start to see why maybe they have hottest year ever. But the big headlines are going to be coming in. Again, I keep saying it. Watch for it. The ozone is really starting to run away right now. Now, this is a monthly comparison of June 21 on the right, before the Hunga Tonga eruption. And on the left, post Hunga Tonga eruption with more ice crystals in the mesosphere where the ozone can break down. So here's what we're looking at today in July. So the July 5th, 2023, that should be somewhere around in August. So this is running at least a month ahead on depletion. So when we get into the really deep months at the end of it, the biggest ozone hole area, late September, early October, it's going to be much wider. It'll be breaking records. So this will be another thing that they can run away with. Oh, the ozone. So watch it. It's October might be ozone month. So we got flag month last month. This month we got heat month. Next month's going to be eat insect month. But somewhere around September, October, we're going to get ozone month. So they're going to dissect each month. It's just a rotating regurgitation of narratives. And the Arctic sea ice, of course, or Antarctic, excuse me, of course it's going to melt. You got more UVB radiation coming down. What do you think UVB radiation does? Think of a microwave oven. And they're going, well, the Antarctic sea ice is melting. I wonder why. You think it's underwater volcanoes, or do you think it's an increase in UVB because of record runaway already at this point, depleting ozone? You could choose A or B or combine those two because they're both happening. And then magically I'm scratching out maybe you're making ice in your ice maker. That's the reason the Antarctic ice is decreasing, because you're making ice in the northern hemisphere for your holiday. And you can see as confused as it is. I try to make sense of it every week. Thank you for joining. David Dubine signing off. Brighty on TV. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.